Hey folks, thanks for joining in. My name is Michael here with Clear Estimates Customer Success. We're just going to wait one more minute here for a few more viewers to join in with us, and then we're going to jump in here in just a sec. While we're waiting, there should be a chat feature over on the right side of your screen. Feel free to enter in your name there. It'll let you participate in the chat. And then as we go along today, feel free to add in any questions that come to mind. We're going to be getting to as many of those as questions as we can as we go along. And I'll probably have a dedicated Q&A right at the end. I'm also going to be sharing a link at the end of the presentation if you would like to set up a one-on-one call with us as well. That is included in your subscription as well as your free trial. So feel free to schedule some time with us. But the idea today is to give you a thorough walkthrough of Clear Estimates. It's about a minute after here, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am going to go ahead and stop my camera just so you can see my slideshow here. Great. So we're going to talk today about how to get started. We're going to talk about navigating Clear Estimates, how to search for parts, and how to create an estimate. And then we're going to talk about saving time with templates. From there, we're going to talk about finalizing the estimate, so setting up legal language, creating draw schedules, setting up invoices and payments. Now, in past months, I've done kind of example estimates from a mock takeoff, and I usually don't go into invoicing too much on these training sessions. But last month, after last month's webinar, we did have a couple of follow-up questions from viewers who would like us to focus a little more on that this month. So today we'll give you a crash course on the estimating process. Then we'll talk about invoices, payments, cost status reports, etc. But let's first talk about Clear Estimates. So this is a great tool for any remodeler to streamline their estimating. It includes a library of locally sourced cost data that you can use to build up your estimate. And it's cloud-based, so it's going to keep your estimates easy to access, organized, and accurate. It's really a tremendous time saver for estimates like this. Now, before we get into the application, it's important to understand how the software is set up and how our library of remodeling costs really works. So just some core concepts for you to keep in mind. Number one, Clear Estimates library is made up of what are called parts. Now, parts are line items. They're the building blocks of your estimate. They price out a specific task, like installing some framing, maybe hanging drywall, maybe painting a wall. Really, any individual task that needs to get priced out in your estimate can be thought of as a part. And we offer a library of around 13,000 or so parts that you can use to build up your estimate, and they each contain cost data for the task itself. So material costs, labor hours, kind of set up as an assembly. When I'm saying assembly, so for example, a wall framing part will include the lumber, the fasteners, the hardware, really anything you need to accomplish that specific task is built into the part cost. Now, this cost data is locally sourced from the area you input when you sign up. We survey a wide variety of suppliers to come up with average unit costs for each area. So it doesn't come from any one specific supplier, more like an aggregate across all suppliers in your region. You can adjust your location anytime if you do need to estimate in different cities or states, and I'm going to show you how to do that here in a little bit. Now, Clear Estimates also comes with over 300 pre-built templates. Now, templates are a list of parts. They're designed to save you time. This way, we're not searching for parts one by one. We're not forgetting anything we commonly need. And the templates are intended kind of as a starting point to get you 80 or 90% of the way through with your estimate or a section of your estimate. And then you can fine-tune them for your exact job. And estimates can really be built up using a combination of parts and templates. By the way, if you're just joining in, there is a chat messenger over on the right side of your screen. If you enter in your name, it'll let you participate in the chat. If you do any questions, just feel free to send those in. I'm going to get to as many as we can as we go along. Now, once you build your estimate, it is going to generate a proposal for you automatically. So it's going to save you the time of researching the costs, typing out the proposals. So with all of that introduction out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into Clear Estimates. Perfect. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of give you a little bit of a tour of the layout of the system, just so you know where everything is and what everything does. Now, when you first log in, you're going to be right here on this home page. And this is kind of your dashboard for recent estimates we've worked on. So it's going to show us our 5 most recent projects that have been edited really in any way are going to be shown right here on the home page. This is also where we can start a new project. And there's also a quick crash course tutorial on Clear Estimates over here on the right side of the home page. So we'll see these recent projects here. We can click any of these project titles to open these up. If you've just signed up, these are all just going to be sample estimates, but same idea. You can just click the project title. It'll open it up if you want to take a look. You can also click your customer name. It'll take you into a profile that can be found here in the customers tool. And like I said, this is your 5 most recent, and you can also use this search bar to search for recent customers or projects. Before we set up a project, first I just kind of want to continue the tour, tell you what everything is and what everything does. So up at the top, you'll see a series of buttons: Home, Customers, Projects, Reports, and Tools. Now the home page, like I said, we just explained this. This is what we're looking at right now. It's just where we start a new project, pull up recent estimates. The Customers tool is where you're going to find your whole backlog of all clients that you've added into Clear Estimates. And you'll see that they each have their own profile. So if you click their name here on the left, it's going to show you their profile here, and you'll see all of their different projects as these cards down here in their profile. So you can click these up or click these to open this up and take a look at those estimates. And like I said, back on home, you can always click the recent customer name and it would take you into their profile. Projects page, where we're going to spend most of our time in the presentation today. It's also where you spend most of your time in Clear Estimates. This is where you're actually building the estimate, kind of managing the project as it's underway, is right here on projects. Reports, this is where we can export proposals, different styles of proposals. It's also where we can set up contract language that appears at the top or at the bottom of the proposal. It's also where you can set up invoices, payments. So we'll be spending some time in there today. Now the tools drop down, this is all of your account level settings. So things like the part library, this is where you'd manage all of the default settings for the parts that's provided by Clear Estimates or any you've created yourself. This is kind of your source of truth. So all of the default settings for your part library live right there. So this is where you could add in your own custom part that live in your library on a permanent basis, or you could permanently edit some of the parts that Clear Estimates offers. If you wanted to update their descriptions or costs, you'll be able to do that there. The template library is where you manage template settings. This is also where you can create new templates that just live in your account. Not where you build an estimate, but where you kind of manage the settings for your templates. So for example, you could do something like take one of the Clear Estimates templates, make a copy of it, make some customizations, and save your own version of that template. You'd be able to do that in the template library. Update pricing location. This is where you can estimate in different cities or states. If we click, again, tools, update pricing location, it'll take us into the update tool where we can see what location our account is currently using. So I'm set up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We can see that because active is checked in the gray column for Ann Arbor. So that's how we know what location we're using. Now, if we wanted to add in a different location to estimate in a different city or zip, we can just click Add Location. Then you can search by zip or city. And it's going to show you the most, or really the closest available pricing to your zip code right here. From there, you would just go ahead and click the plus to add a location into the list. So you can see previously I added in Detroit. So if I wanted to refresh to Detroit pricing, I can just click that update tool. And that's going to update my pricing to Detroit. And we see that's active now. And if I wanted to switch back to Ann Arbor, same idea, just switch it right back. The last thing in the tools dropdown I didn't cover was options. Options is going to be all of your account settings, subscription settings. This is where you can set up different types of integrations, manage your company information that appears on the top of your proposals. All of that takes place in options. And then here in this question mark, this is just support information, help center. If you wanted to take a look at any tutorials or webinars, you can find all of that here, as well as register for the next training webinar. And down here, you'll see what's new. Anytime we release a price update or if there's been a change to the software, you'll see news about that there. This bell icon, this is going to be your notifications for emails that you've sent out. So when you send out proposals, it's going to show you email delivery statuses here. So for example, you can see customer opened the email, and then you can see all of the attached files if you ever needed to download that. And then lastly, in your email, this is where you can manage your subscription, update your password. If you are on a pro account, you can invite additional users or log out. Great. So that gives you just a quick tour of the system. And I'm going to head back to the home page here. And let's go ahead and start a new project. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button right here, New Project. Again, we're on home and we're just going to click New Project right here. So that's going to pull up this new project window where it would like some information about the customer we're estimating for. So first name, last name, email, and then you'd input a project title and a description to get started. So I'm just going to call this John Homeowner. And I'm just going to, let me go back. Sorry about that. John Homeowner. And then we'll input an email for him, just kind of a dummy email. It uses the email to send the proposal to your client. I'm just putting a dummy email in, but it is required. So I'm just going to put that here. And then we'll call this guest bedroom bath upgrade. Project description field. This is just an opportunity to add a little more detail. You know, if I wanted to say 100 square foot guest bedroom remodel, really any description you want to give that, you can put that here. So then I'm going to click continue. And next, Clear Estimates is going to ask me a question. It's going to say, will this project contain multiple components? So that's an interesting question. What are components? So in Clear Estimates, components are an organizational feature. They're used to organize the proposal by room or by phase of the job. So if you're doing a multiple part estimate, maybe a kitchen and bath combo, you can actually set up these sections ahead of time just by clicking yes and then naming the sections, and it'll create those sections automatically. I'm going to show you this in a little bit. For right now, I'm going to say no just to keep it simple, but in a little bit, we're going to get into components and how those work. So then I'm going to click continue, and that's going to take me over to the projects page. And this is where you spend most of your time in Clear Estimates. This is where we build the estimate, we change the estimate if it needs any changes. This is where we manage change orders for the estimate. This is really where you're going to be spending most of your time. Now, before we start building the estimate, I just want to give you a tour of this page. Like I said, you spend tons of time here on this page, so I want you to know what everything is and what everything does. Now, you'll notice in the very top left corner, you'll see in bold text my customer name and the project I currently have open. So you'll see this no matter where you go in the software, it'll have a currently open project or a currently open estimate. But if I wanted to change the title of my project, I can do that up here in the top left of the projects page. If I wanted to update the title and make any changes there, I can do that. Just click that pencil, it'll let you type in. Same thing with the project description. If you wanted to make any edits, you could do that right up here, top left. If we click the customer name, it would take us into his profile. If we wanted to adjust any of the contact info that appears at the top of the report, we can click their name. Top right corner, you're going to see various tools related to your project. The most important of which is this eyeball right here, View Report, because this is how we'll actually preview the proposal before we send it off to our customer. So that's going to be, once again, in View Report, print to PDF. Just to the right of that, you'll see Send to Customer. So after we previewed our proposal, then we can send it off to our customer. Just click Send Report to Customer. It'll prepare an email for our client with the proposal as an attachment. The Export Project dropdown, this is how you can print more internal reports of the project details. Not as designed to be as customer-facing as the proposal, but more of just kind of a detailed breakdown of your estimate that you can print to PDF, Word, or Excel. If you're a pro user, this is also where you'll export to Buildertrend, and really any user can interface with QuickBooks down here. And then the More dropdown will have just various tools related to the project. So duplicate project, super handy feature, especially if you're doing a lot of similar jobs. Why build the same estimate twice when you can just make a copy of a previous estimate for a new customer and have that out the door in half the time? We can archive projects when we're done with them. We can also save completed projects as new templates. So another super handy feature here, you can actually just create a preloaded template out of a completed job. Activity history is email delivery history. And then there's also a shortcut to create and view invoices here. A little bit here, we're going to get into invoicing. So I'm not going to show you these right now, but later on we'll talk about these. And then down at the bottom, we can refresh prices. Let's say if we duplicated an estimate from last year, we want to update the pricing on that. We could do that way. And this is also where you can integrate with Clearant, now called Explore Pay for payable invoicing. Now, just below that is what I like to call the part search interface. And it's just the different tools you can use to add costs into your estimate. You'll see there's a search bar. If we want to search for a search term, we can type in something like drywall or framing, and it'll search the whole library for those terms. Browse Part Library allows you to get a little more specific in your search, really open up the full catalog of cost data provided by Clear Estimates. Create custom part is how you can add in your own part if you can't find something in the library or you just want to add in something very quickly. You can create these on the fly pretty quick. And then add template. This is like we were talking about in the beginning with templates. So templates are just pre-built estimates designed to get you 80 or 90% of the way through with a project or section of a project. And you can browse templates here. So we're going to get into all of that. Below that, we're going to see the project parts window. We see it's blank because I haven't added any costs into this estimate yet. But as we do, we'll see all of our project parts here and we'll be able to see and manage them here. Just a little bit below that, you'll see the markup tool. It's important to remember that none of our part costs include any profit or markup for you. It's just the cost for you as the contractor to do the work. So you can always apply a markup percentage. It's just based on a percentage you tack on for material, labor, and any subcontractor cost you plug in. And it's just based on a percentage, and you can update that percentage here. Below that are alternates and components. Components, like we were talking about, this is just a way you can organize the estimate. Maybe you have a multiple part estimate. If you wanted bedroom 1, bedroom 2, bedroom 3 with a subtotal for each on the proposal, we could set them up using components. So we'll talk about this a little later. Alternates work very similarly, only they're used for creating change orders or showing options on the proposal. Alternates work just exactly the same as components. The difference is they don't get included into your project cost. So it gives you a separate section of the estimate, not included in the project cost, to set up things like change orders, maybe if you wanted to show some options or selections on your proposal. And they have their own standalone change order document as well. Down at the bottom is miscellaneous items. This is used for things like taxes, discounts, any extra percentage you want to add into your project. You can use miscellaneous items for that. So this is handy for, let's say, if you are doing cost plus estimating and you don't want your markup hidden, because our markup percentages just get kind of figured into the project cost without having a specific line that shows how much your markup is. If you did need to do cost plus, you could just zero out the markup and then add in your markup percentage as a miscellaneous item. That way it actually shows on the proposal. But these are really easy to set up. So I'll just go ahead and do this first very quickly. So I'll just click the plus. I'll just add in a line for sales tax. And then we can set it up based on a dollar amount or a percentage of the project cost. So I'll select percentage. I'll just plug in a 6% sales tax. We do have this drop down here if you want to choose where it's going to calculate that percentage from. I'm going to do the actual total cost before markup, and we'll just save that. So you can see those are really easy to add in, and those will itemize at the bottom of your proposal. Great, so that walks you through the layout of the projects page. So now let's start talking about the process for building an estimate. So like I was saying earlier, if you just wanted to use this search bar to search for something, you can. So if I wanted to type in something like drywall, it's going to pull up lots and lots of results for drywall across many different part categories. So you can see we're getting results for things like create door opening in 8-inch wide and drywall wall, finish with drywall. So not exactly a drywall cost, but it does have that word in there. So we're seeing lots of results. So what I might recommend if you're just getting started, rather than search for parts this way, I always recommend get started with this button here, Browse Part Library, because this will open up the full catalog of cost data provided by Clear Estimates, and it's a little easier to navigate through it and search for what you need. So when I click Browse Part Library, it's going to pull up this window. And you might notice that there's popular searches, suggested searches down here. I would just ignore all of this if you're just getting started. Really just focus on these category dropdowns that you see right up here at the top. Because this is how we can kind of sort of surf through the whole catalog of pricing. So if I click this first dropdown here, select a category, you'll see it's going to show me all of the cost categories or cost codes of costs that are included in Clear Estimates. And you can see there's tons built in here. You'll notice it's also roughly chronological to the way you'd be thinking about the work in the actual project, right? So we're starting off with project prep. There's a ton of different categories dedicated to demolition costs. Further down, we get into the building portions like concrete and masonry and framing. Further down, we'd find things like doors and windows and roofing, skylights and what have you. So you can see there's tons built in and ready to go. So here's how this works. So let's say, for example, I wanted to take a look at some wall framing costs. I'm going to go ahead and click 10 wall framing. Now, when I click 10 wall framing, it's going to show me all of the parts that are built into 10 wall framing. And you can see there's tons and tons in here. So we see the description for each item. We see in the middle column the category information where the part lives. Over here, we're going to see this cost column. This is always your material cost per unit. So we can see cost per unit here. So for example, this first part, install 2x4 16-inch on-center wood frame wall up to 8 feet tall. We have 85 cents per square foot. And then in the hours per unit column, we have labor hours. So this lets you know that there's labor cost figured into the part, and it's also the labor hours per unit. So per square foot, per linear foot, piece, etc. Now, you might be thinking to yourself while you're looking through this, wow, this is a lot of parts. I don't want to sit and scroll through all this. And fortunately, you don't need to, because in Browse Part Library, now that we've selected 10 wall framing, we can use subcategories to get more specific. So under 10 wall framing, I can then narrow down my search by wood wall framing, sheathing, columns, knee wall, furring, and so on. So let's go ahead and grab wood wall framing. And a lot of times we can use part groups to get even more specific. So for wood wall framing, I have 2x4, 2x6, 2x8 options. So I'm going to go ahead and grab wood wall framing 2x4. And then you can see this narrows down our search a lot. So we're just looking at a handful of items in different heights here. So next, let's go ahead and add one of these parts into the estimate. So I'm going to go ahead and grab install 2x4 16-inch on center here. It's up to 8 feet tall. And I'm going to go ahead and click that part with my mouse. And that's going to pull up this little preview where we can price out the part. And really all Clear Estimates requires to price out the part is the quantity. Something like a wall framing cost, and this is the same with wall drywall, it's looking for the wall area. So just for example, this is an 8 feet 10 wall, maybe it's 10 feet in length. I just plug in 80 square feet of wall framing, and that's going to use the cost information to price out 80 square feet of wall framing, again, pre-markup, pre-tax numbers here. So that's really all you need to do is just plug in your quantity, and then you're going to see this add part option. This is going to add that part into our estimate. So it can really be as simple as just choose the part you need, plug in your quantity, add part. But there's more we can do here. So let's go through one more quick example. So maybe I wanted to price out some drywall. A lot of times drywall is either going to be in wall coverings or ceiling coverings, and it's fun because you can actually kind of filter your categories here. So if I were to type in something like coverings, I can just quickly grab wall coverings. I want to see some drywall. I just want to see some standard drywall. And now we're just looking at a handful of parts for standard drywall here. So let's go ahead and grab install 1/2-inch drywall taped and finished over 300 square feet. And again, I could just plug in a quantity if I just wanted to say 300 square feet, 360 square feet, and call it a day. But we can do all kinds of different customizations to the part right here from this window as well. Anything we're doing from this preview is project specific. So we're not making any permanent adjustments to the library items when we're making adjustments here. It's all specific to this estimate only. So I'm just going to walk you through this whole tool, let you know what all of these different tools do. Up here at the top, you'll see the part description. And this is really your internal Clear Estimates part description. It's built to fit into your part search, so there is a character limit here. I think it's 255 characters. And it's what you see in the search module when you're looking for parts is this description. But this isn't what actually shows up on proposals for clients. Instead, what shows up is all the way down here at the bottom, you'll see this report text section. And you'll notice right off the bat that there's 3 different text boxes, all just for the same one part. Preliminary, formal, and subcontractor. And what these are is they're the different styles of proposals you can print from any estimate in Clear Estimates. So all of our parts have preloaded text for 3 different styles of reports, meaning that you could build an estimate once and then immediately export 3 different proposal styles. Preliminary is generally a little more brief. It doesn't include as much detail. Usually this is used for kind of an initial walkthrough, kind of a rough estimate that you're given to the client. It doesn't include exact quantities or unit types. So usually these are a little more brief. The subcontractor proposal, this is just a scope of work for a sub. It doesn't include a project cost. This way you can give some line items to a sub, have them give you a price back. But most commonly, you use this middle box here, formal proposal. So this is the default output from Clear Estimates. When we were looking at that view report and send to customer buttons here on the projects page, it's the formal proposal that those send and that those preview. So most of the time, if you need to customize what an item says on your proposal, you can do that right down here under the formal proposal text. Scrolling back up, we can start talking about the cost calculation section. And this is how you can adjust the way the part is priced. So the first thing you'll see up here is unit types, and these are just the way the part is priced. These are provided out of the box. You'll have a cost per square foot, per linear foot, per piece, depending on what the part is. And this all corresponds to how it's priced. So, here in material, we have 49 cents per square foot, and we have labor cost. It's 0.028 hours per square foot. You can change to a different unit type if you wanted to customize the part. It's not a conversion calculator, so it's not going to make any difference as far as the cost. But you could, if you wanted to price this by the linear foot, you could click linear foot and then change that cost right there. Piece is generally used for is kind of your catch-all for anything not priced by square foot or linear foot. So this is common for doors, windows, things like skylights. Square foot is common for things like flooring or anything that has to do with the wall area. Linear foot is common for baseboard or trim or things that go around the perimeter of a space. Cubic yards, this is used for dirt works or earth hauling. Any kind of debris removal often uses cubic yards. And dollars and hours are just kind of older unit types. They're just a simple dollar amount for material or a number of hours for labor. Looks like we have a quick question here from Nate. Nate is asking, where do you source your data for the estimates, and when material is involved, how can we know exactly what materials are included, like in your drywall example for reference? Great question. So first of all, the data doesn't come from any one particular supplier. It comes from an aggregate across all suppliers in your area. It's updated for you every quarter. The way you want to think about our part costs is as assemblies. So, something like this drywall part is going to include the costs for tape and finish, as well as the drywall material itself in the unit cost for the part. But it won't print out a purchase order that's going to give you the exact number of sheets of drywall. Really, it's meant to just price it out based on the area that you're inputting. So at the moment, it doesn't print out a purchase order like that, where it shows you those exact materials that are included. But more often than not, because they're set up as assemblies, a part will tell you if something is not included rather than what is. So you can kind of assume that everything you're going to need for that specific task is included in the part cost here. So if we scroll down just a little bit, then we get into our cost calculators here, and you'll see that there's 3 different ones: material, labor, and subcontractor. So the way the material cost works, usually it's $1 per unit cost. So we can see that here. And what that means is it's a cost per square foot for material. So it's going to take this number and multiply it by whatever our part quantity is. So if I input 300 square feet, it's going to take that cost per square foot, multiply that by my square footage, and that's how it arrives at the material cost. As far as labor, it works a little bit different. So it's got hours per unit, and this is the calculation type most of your parts use by default. And this is the labor hours per square foot. So it takes this number, multiplies it by the part quantity, and again by the labor rate. So you can almost imagine kind of an invisible triangle here for this calculation. So that's how it kind of arrives at this total labor cost. Now, if we wanted to make any adjustments, we can. So we can adjust the hours per unit number. If we wanted to bump that up or reduce the labor hours, we can. We can also select a different labor rate from this drop down here. And this is going to show you all of your preloaded account rates. Those are going to be found in tools under options. And then there's the labor rate editor in there. I'll show you that later. But you could select a different rate from the list. You could also just plug in a number. So if I just said, $100 an hour, it's going to warn me, hey, this isn't the typical value for this item. But you can really just plug in any number there you'd like or select a different rate from the drop down here. One thing on material I didn't cover, this multiplier, just leave this at 1. I generally just recommend you ignore this. What it's for is for adding an extra percentage to your material costs. I'm sorry to skip around like this, but let's say, for example, we wanted to add 20% to the material cost. I could change this to 1.2. We see that just tacks on 20%, but generally just leave that material multiplier at 1. I just forgot to explain that in the previous example there. But switching our attention back over to labor again, there's different ways we can price out labor cost as well. So by default, our parts use hours per unit, but I have different options here. So if I click this drop down, I could set it up as a per unit cost. So maybe I don't want to use a labor rate and I just want to say, it's $2 per square foot for labor. Then it's just going to work just like the material does, just this number multiplied by quantity. Lump sum is for a flat cost. Maybe I just want to say, okay, you know what? It's going to be $500 in labor, Don't worry about the part quantity. Don't worry about the labor rate. I just want flat $500 cost for labor. Then we can always switch it over to lump sum and just define what that value is here. And lastly, if we just wanted to multiply a number of hours against a labor rate, that's what hours will do. It just ignores that part quantity. I can just say it's, no matter what, it's 3 hours at my carpenter rate here. You can also plug in a lump sum cost for material, I should mention. Now, none of the parts in Clear Estimates, because there's no markup included in our part costs, none of them are set up as subcontractor costs. But this is optional. So if you wanted to, omit the labor and material or both, you can then plug in a subcontractor cost and just define how you want that priced out. And it's got a lot of those same options. Most commonly with a subcontractor, they've just given you a total price to do the job. So most commonly you just plug in a lump sum. Maybe they said, it's going to be $800 to do this. We can just plug that in like so. And I think that about covers everything. Keep in mind, you can always take a look at the category information for the part up here, or if you wanted to open the default settings for a part, you can do that right up here in Open in Part Library. Once everything looks good, we're just going to add that part in. Remember, all those changes we made are just specific to this estimate. So if I grab the same part again, it's right back to the default settings from the library. So let's take a look at what we've done so far. So we've added in 2 different parts to our estimate. We can see the descriptions here on the overview, the quantity. We can always click into these quantity columns, make adjustments on the fly. A lot of these columns are clickable if you just wanted to make quick adjustments to any of the costs. And then if we wanted to open any parts in our estimate, we can do that with the pencil. Just brings you right back into that adjust part view. We can delete parts using the trash can. And we can also do bulk actions using the checkboxes here. So, if I needed to move these to a different project, if I wanted to move these to a different project, I can use the actions button, move them somewhere else, copy, or bulk delete. Great. So now that we've added some parts into our estimate, we can kind of see the cost breakdown here. So here up at the top, we see the total, and this is your dollar value for the project before markups. So this is the project cost without your profit included. Here in blue text, we can see the dollar amount of markup that's being applied. And then this is the number for the client in orange. This is called base bid, and it's your after markup cost. So it never shows your client what the markup is. It just kind of rolls that into the project cost here. But once again, you can always adjust that down in these markup settings down here below. Okay, see if we have any questions before we move on. Doesn't look like anything else is coming in just yet. So let's just kind of go through all of the different ways you can add costs into a project. So create custom part. This is handy if you just need to add in something very quickly, or if there's something you can't find in the library. There's 2 ways you can do this. Simple mode, just you select a category, input a description, material and labor cost, and save. So pretty easy to do that. If you wanted that full suite of calculators we were just looking at, just click standard, and then you can kind of build the part up like this from scratch, and then add the part. Custom parts just get saved into the estimate. They don't get automatically added to your library, but if you ever needed to, you can open them with the pencil. This isn't going to work because this is a library part, but you'll see in the more dropdown for custom parts, you'd have an option to save as new part in library here. And that brings us over to templates. So like I was saying in the beginning, we have about 300 or so pre-built templates for common jobs, kitchens, baths, additions. And they're designed to be kind of a nice starting point for your project, get you 80 or 90% of the way there. So let's go ahead and click Add Template. Keep in mind, we're right here on the projects page, and we're going to click Add Template. And similar to your parts, the templates are also categorized. So you're going to see a select a category drop down here, and this is where you can browse templates for additions, bathrooms, demolition, decking, kitchens, floor systems, painting, plenty of different types of room remodels. So let's say we just wanted to look at some room remodels bedroom templates. I'm going to go ahead and grab room remodels bedroom. And then using the middle dropdown, I can select a specific template. So you can see there's a handful of bedroom remodel templates here with different flooring types. So ceramic flooring, laminate flooring, down here is going to be pre-finished wood. And then you'll notice that there's different grades, economy, average, premium. That just refers to the grades of materials, really the quality of materials. If it's a more high-end materials that your client is using as their selections, you could go with a premium template. If they're more on the economy side, you could grab economy. So let's go ahead and grab remodel bedroom ceramic flooring average. Now, when I click that template title, you're going to see what the template is. So it's just a list of suggested parts that are commonly seen in this type of a bedroom remodel. And it's going to try to cover as much ground as possible. So we're seeing a lot of demolition costs for things like baseboard, trim removal, removing carpeting and flooring materials. We have a whole section just dedicated to electrical costs. Further down, we're going to get into things like drywalls for walls and ceiling, doors, as well as trim, baseboard, flooring materials, and painting. So it's going to try to cover as much ground as possible. But like I said, we do want to think about this as a starting point. Now, what is cool about the Clear Estimates templates is that all of these parts have formulas attached that tie back to this template quantity right in the top right. So what this allows you to do as an estimator is just plug in the footprint square footage of this bedroom. So let's say it was 100 square feet, just for example. I can plug that into my template quantity and then click Calculate Quantities. And what it'll do is it's going to come up with suggested quantities for each of these parts based on a 100 square foot bedroom. Now, again, it's just to get you in the ballpark. So what you want to do at this point is just look through all of these parts and kind of compare it to what you have in a takeoff or a set of plans and make any adjustments if needed. So maybe I measured, it's only 28 linear feet of baseboard coming out. I can just quickly click into that quantity column and make a quick adjustment there. And that's going to dial in my costs for what I need. But it's meant to just save you the time of doing that for every single item. Also, so up here you might see that there's this template description. This is kind of instructions for you on how to use the template. And it's saying, there's options in this template for various choices of flooring types to remove or various electrical parts to choose from. So what it's trying to say is basically you're not going to need every single part in this template and to uncheck any parts you don't need. So when it's saying, we've got different types of flooring to remove, if I'm looking in my demolition here and I'm looking at resilient sheet flooring, solid wood strip flooring, and remove carpet, I can just remove what I don't need. So maybe I don't need the resilient sheet flooring. I can just uncheck any parts that aren't going to be relevant to my estimate using that checkbox there on the left. And so let's say, for example, maybe a different contractor is doing all the electrical. We could just uncheck all of these if they're not going to be relevant to our estimate. So we haven't added these parts to the estimate yet. We're just kind of staging them, getting them ready, and making any adjustments on the fly. Now, if you're looking through this template and you're saying, well, there's something I need that I don't see in this template, that's no problem, because what we can do is we can first add the template into the project, and then we could browse the library for additional parts to join in with the template items. So like I was saying in the beginning, a lot of times your project's going to be built using a combination of parts and templates. Now, down at the bottom, we have choices in terms of where to add the template. We can add it in the main window or as a new alternate or a new component. And again, those are just sections of the estimate if we wanted it organized by room or phase when we're talking about components, or an alternate if we wanted to set it up as a change order. I'm just going to add it into the main window, and we'll click Add Template. And you'll see that's going to copy and paste all of those template parts right here into my project where I can continue to see and manage them. And like I said, if something that we needed wasn't in that template, maybe I needed a set of plans or something like that. Now that I've added the template into the project, I can just go right back into Browse Part Library, grab some permit fees or anything that I need, and then just grab one of these parts, add it into my project. Maybe I needed some finalization. Maybe there was some cleanup work, some hauling debris or general cleanup I needed to do. Maybe I need to rent a dumpster. A lot of times that's in finalization. I can just quickly pull these costs up, plug them into my estimate, and it just joins those parts with the template parts. And that's kind of how you want to think about it. Just as a starting point, get you 80 or 90% of the way there, and then you can plug this into the estimate. All right, so let me take a quick look here at the audience chat, see if any questions have come up. Not seeing anything yet. Great, so before we move on, let's just quickly take a look at the proposal, just so you can get an idea of what that looks like so far. So once again, to do that, we're gonna go View Report and Print to PDF, and this is gonna pull up the document that we're gonna be sending over to the client once the estimate's complete. So here's my proposal for this project. You can see I plugged in my company logo. In a little bit, I'll show you where to do that if you haven't done so already. I also have my submitted by, which is my contact info, submitted to, which is my client's contact info. I'm going to want to put in his address, his phone, make this look a little more professional. So I'll show you how to do that in a sec. I also have some contract language that I include on all my estimates that's going to display right up here at the top. In a second, I'm going to show you where to find and adjust that. And then down below, we get into the actual project details. So we can see we didn't type any of this out. We didn't look up any of these costs. Clear Estimates just automatically prints out a professional sentence of text that explains the scope of work to the client, language they can understand. It's even organized by cost category here. And then down at the bottom, we see that sales tax is itemized, my total cost after markup here. And then we have a place they can sign the agreement. Now, if you wanted your line items itemized where it's showing the total cost of each line, there's a setting for that in your options tool where you can set that up by default and it shows the total cost of each line. And I can show you that in a bit. But it's designed to be more client facing to avoid them shopping the estimate around. So by default, it just gives the item descriptions and the total cost. That way they don't take the estimate off to other contractors and shop it around. But like I said, there's settings for all of this stuff. So let's go ahead and talk about some of that. So if I wanted to customize John's contact info on the proposal, we can do that just by clicking his name here. And then I can go ahead and update that just by clicking edit. It's going to take me right to his profile. And then I could plug in, his street address. And his phone number. Just put in a dummy phone number there. You can also add multiple client addresses. Maybe the client actually, owns the property but doesn't live there and you want to have a couple of different addresses displayed. You could do that. You can add multiple phones and emails as well. We're just going to save changes there. And then the next time we preview the proposal, it'll actually update and have his contact info. So we'll see that in a bit. I also wanted to talk about this paragraph of legal language and where to customize that before we move on. So you can do that in this reports tool right up at the top. We haven't been here yet. Like I was saying in the beginning, this is where you can adjust your contract language. And I'll talk about that in just a sec. But this is, while we're here, also where you can export different styles of proposals. You'll see there's different tabs for your different proposal styles: preliminary, formal, subcontractor. And then there's this cost status tab where we manage invoices and payments. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But when we click reports here, the first thing it's going to do is take us into the boilerplate tab. And this is where we adjust all of that contract language. So what we want to do on this page is scroll down to the very bottom left here. And you'll see this boilerplate information box. And you can see that I have a series of different contracts here. And when you first sign up, there's a bunch of different sample languages here that you can kind of click through. And you'll notice that as I'm clicking these titles, these are all different contracts, we're seeing different text populate over here on the right side. So what that means is you can set up your own language just by clicking add heading down here. We'll click into that heading and then we'll use this text box over on the right side to kind of fill that in. So if I wanted to call this something like general agreement, and then I can use this text box to either type or paste in my contract language. There's various formatting tools up here. There's also ways you can insert what are called variables, and this basically just shows different information from the project. So maybe I wanted to show the project cost or the project date or the project title in the boilerplate language. I could do something like select project cost, click into here, and then click the brackets, and then it'll know to display the current project cost in the language. So I always like to explain how those work, just ways you can insert different information from the estimate here. Now, once we've kind of put together our contract language, we just need to tell Clear Estimates where to put it. And the way we do that is using these check boxes that you see to the left of each of these headers. So what these are is P, F, and S. This is preliminary, formal, and subcontractor proposals. So they're basically just on and off switches for your different reports. So if I wanted to have this appear at the top of the formal proposal, I would just click the F column. And it's going to appear at the top because we're in intro mode here, but there's also outro if I wanted the contract at the bottom below the project contents. And you can see this is where you'd also do things like edit your signature lines or add in any kind of extra contract that you want to appear at the bottom. Great. And so that's how you edit that paragraph of legal language you see up at the top. And if you're seeing the example, you can always edit that once again in reports and boilerplate. All right. I want to go back to the project now and start talking about if we wanted to set up something like a multiple room or a multiple phase estimate. So the way we do that is using that components tool that we were looking at earlier. So if I scroll down and maybe I wanted to add in something like an adjoining bath for this estimate, I can scroll down to the components window, and this is where it's going to show us all of the different subsections of our estimate as we create them. So if I wanted to add in, a separate phase of the job for a bathroom remodel, I can just go ahead and click this plus here in the components tool. And that's going to take us into a component. And basically what this is it's a subsection of the estimate that's still included in the main project here. So we see we're still in guest bedroom and bath upgrade. But now I'm in a new component, and I'm just going to call this bath upgrade. And then you'll notice that it kind of gives you a hint that you're in a component. It's got component highlighted in blue here. We can see which component we're in right here. And then you'll notice that we can get back to the main estimate just by clicking back to main project. So right now we're just in this bathroom component. And then here it's the exact same process. We can add parts and templates into this bath upgrade portion of my estimate using these tools right here in the component. So just for the sake of time, I'll just quickly add a bathroom template into this component just so you can see what this does on the proposal. So if I just wanted to grab one of these new bathroom templates, plug in a square footage, let's just say it's a little 80 square foot bathroom, calculate. Of course, in real life, we kind of want to review these quantities, uncheck anything we don't need, add the template in, and browse for any additional parts that are going to be relevant to the estimate. But in this case, I'm just going to drop this template in here so you can see what this does. So I'm going to go back to main project here. Now, the first thing I want you to notice when we go back to the main estimate is that as we scroll through these project contents, you'll see that some of these parts here now have a component code C00, and this lets you know that these parts are in a component. Why that's important is because it's showing us everything in the whole estimate. We have the main estimate contents. You see there's no component code there for those parts. And then we see a whole bunch of different C00 parts. And if we scroll down to our component tool, we can see that C00 are all my bath upgrade items. So if you are building a multiple room or multiple phase estimate, I always recommend just scroll down to the components tool, open up each component individually. This way you're not getting confused looking at tons of different parts across lots of different components. This way we're only looking at bath upgrade parts while we're working on bath upgrade. And then, if we were to add in multiple components, we can just kind of work on those one at a time right here. And keep in mind, you can always open that back up using the pencil, or you can delete the component using the trash. And I'll show you what this does on the proposal. So let's go ahead and reprint that proposal again. We're going to go view report, print to PDF. Give that a second to populate here. Great. And by the way, it now shows our updated customer info. And then if we scroll down here, the first thing you'll see is the bath upgrade component. So it's got C00 bath upgrade. And then we're seeing all of the line items specific to the bath upgrade just underneath that. And then it's giving us a subtotal for just that guest bath. Then it gets back into the main project contents. Now, if you ever get into the situation where you have a main project as well as a component, and you might think to yourself, well, I want the guest bath to appear below this bedroom remodel. So what you would need to do in that case is just add your main project contents into their own component. So what you would do in that case is just scroll down to your components tool, click the plus. We would create a new section for the bedroom remodel. We go back to the main project. And then what we could do is just kind of go through the estimate. Like I could select all of these parts here and just uncheck any of the parts that are in these components. I'm not going to go through every single item here, but basically what we could do at that point is just go actions and move. And then we could select that bedroom remodel component. It would move all of those parts into that component. And then we can kind of rearrange how they display down here. So components always show before main project contents, but you can always move parts around to different sections just by following those same steps. Great. Another thing I want to say about components is that, if let's say we built up this whole estimate using components, we had bedroom one, bedroom two, maybe a bath and a kitchen, you can do a lot of cool stuff with just the components by themselves. So if I open up one of these components and I wanted to just duplicate the component by itself, so maybe you have an estimate from a year ago, really similar bedroom that you're doing, really similar bath upgrade that you're doing, then you could just take that component, go into the more drop down, hit duplicate component, and then just copy that section of an estimate to either a different project as another component, or you could create a brand new project just from that component. So it's got a lot of time saving tools in here to do things like duplicate projects, duplicate sections of projects. And it just makes that a lot easier to save time. All right, another thing I want to cover before we get into invoicing and payment schedules is alternates. Alternates are used for change orders. They're also used for showing options on the proposal. Now, they work very similar to components. And in fact, you can actually, if we open up this component, you can toggle back and forth between alternate and component. The big difference with alternates aren't included in the project cost, whereas this component total is. So when we're looking at this 16,074 value, that's actually included in this total project cost. But if we create an alternate, it just gives us a separate section of the estimate not included in the project cost to do something like set up a change order or show some options. So if I click the plus here on the alternate, you see it looks very similar. I just wanted to say option 1 or option 2, option 3. We can plug that in here. And then we can do the same thing, just kind of build up this alternate the same way as we did with the main estimate. Browse part library, adding parts from custom or from templates. So let's say I just wanted to give them a different choice of bedroom model. Maybe I wanted to put in one of those premium grade options here. Let's do ceramic floor premium. Plug in that same square footage, 100, and add that in. What's cool about these is they actually have their own documents. So if we did want to use this as a change order rather than just to show them a selection, we could go view report and print a PDF, and this will pull up what's called the alternate work order, or it's really just a change order document that you could send over to your customer. And it's got an actual signature line down at the bottom where they can agree to the change, basically. I have settings on to itemize all the line items here. That's just a setting in your options tool. Now, let's say they went ahead with that change. We can then go ahead and change our status dropdown. This is really just for you, whether to keep track of the alternates accepted, declined, undecided. You can change this over to accepted and then just convert it to a component. And then if we go back to the main project, we see that now totals, once this loads here, we'll see that it actually now totals into the project cost here. Otherwise, if we just left it as an alternate, what that does is it shows it kind of as an option on the proposal. So there's really two different scenarios. You'd use alternates. Maybe you want to show some different selections if they're not decided, or if you wanted to create a true change order. But on the proposal, this does something different. So if I go view report, print to PDF one more time, I'll show you what the alternate actually does on the proposal. Great. So if I scroll all the way down to the very bottom of the proposal, just below my total project cost, we now have an alternate section. It's just got option 2. So let's say you can plug in any description you want there. Maybe it was high-end bedroom upgrade. And then it shows all of the line items and costs specific to that. Now you can actually just have this be like option 1 cost, option 2 cost, and not show these line items. Those are all just settings in your options tool. Cool. So that just gives you a quick crash course on how alternates and components work. And then at this point, I want to start talking about payment schedules and invoicing. Then I'm just going to give you a quick tour of the options page where you manage all the settings for your different reports. And then we'll just kind of wrap it up with some additional resources for you. So before we start talking about invoices, the first thing I want to talk about is payment schedules, because you can include payment terms on your proposal. Now, what I would do first if you want to build your own payment schedule is find your tools dropdown and then head into your options tool down here at the bottom. And this is going to take us into our options tool. By the way, this is where you can adjust company information, take a look at your default labor rates, as well as all of your report settings, subscription settings, preferences all live here in this options tool. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to head into the payment schedule editor, and this is how we can create a draw schedule. Now there is template draw schedules already built into Clear Estimates. You can see a couple that I've made as well as ones that are included by default. You can see that here in this dropdown. But in this example, I'm actually just going to create a brand new payment schedule from scratch so you can kind of get a feel for that process. So just as a quick reminder, we're in the Options tool under the Tools dropdown in Payment Schedule Editor, and I'm going to click this option here, New Schedule. So the first step when we're building a draw schedule is just give it a title. So I'm going to call this Guest Bedroom Draw Schedule, just for example. If you wanted to make this default, that means it's included on all your projects. What we're doing is we're building a draw schedule template that can be reused. So you can make this default, kind of have it automatically included in any projects you create. I'm just going to leave that alone for now. Now, when you're looking at this, you might be tempted to start typing things into this description box, but you don't need to. This is actually going to get filled in automatically. And what you want to do instead is scroll all the way down to the very bottom of this page, and you're going to see this Add Item button right down here at the bottom. So this is how we're going to do this. For each draw schedule item, we're going to be clicking this button and setting up a separate item. So let's go ahead and click Add Item, and we're just going to add in our first item. Now, when I click Add Item, it's going to say, Add Edit Payment Schedule Item, and then you're going to see 4 different text boxes and some drop downs. So I'm going to walk you through all of this. So the first thing we want to do is input our description. So I'm going to just say something like initial deposit. And then I'm going to say of. And then down at the bottom, there's going to be this type dropdown, and there's 3 different types of draw schedule items you can create: fixed amount, percentage of the project cost, or remaining balance due. This first one I'm going to set up as a fixed amount, and I just want an initial deposit of $1,000. So I'm going to put that into this value bucket right here. I'm just going to plug in 1,000 right here. And then what I need to do is click back up into this description, and I need to insert that value into this description. And the way we're going to do that is using this orange V button right here. And what that's going to do is it's going to insert what's called a variable. This is going to update on the proposal to show the actual value. But now we see it says initial deposit of value, and you want to make sure it says that. Now below that is just the different text boxes for the different styles of reports or documents that we can print that might include a payment schedule. So that's preliminary proposal, formal proposal, and invoice text. Now I like to just keep them all the same. So since I've already set up my description, I've already added my value into my description, I just like to copy my description from the top using this D button. So I just click these 3 Ds. It fills in the same text for all of my different reports. And really, this is how your payment schedule item should look. It should have a description and a value in each of these boxes. And then down at the bottom, we determine what that value is. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's add in another one. So I'm going to add item again. And I'm going to call this 2-week check-in payment of. Then I'm going to click my type dropdown down at the bottom here again, and we're going to use this time percentage of, and I'm just going to say, just for example, I want 50% of the project cost due 2 weeks in. So I'm going to set that up as 50%. That's going to pull 50% of the project cost into the payment schedule. And again, I'm just going to insert that value into my description. And then I'm just going to click these Ds to just autofill that description for each of my different reports. So we'll save that. And let's add one more item here. Let's do a remaining balance due. And in this case, we're just going to hit that type drop down one more time. We're going to grab balance due. There's nothing that you have to do with the value here in this situation. So we'll just do balance due, value, description, 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 and save. So now that we've added in all 3 of our draw schedule items, we need to save the schedule overall one more time just by clicking this blue save. Don't forget to do that. And that's just going to save the schedule into your account. Now, if we want to apply the payment schedule to a project, we're going to do that from our reports tool right up here. So I'm going to click reports. And then we can choose any of the proposal tabs. It doesn't matter which one you choose, but you just want to click one of these proposal tabs. And then for the payment schedule, you'll see there's a drop down right here, payment schedule, and it gives us a drop down. So here, second option down is my guest bedroom draw schedule I just created. Now, once we've selected the draw schedule and apply it to the estimate, we can then make project-specific edits to the payment schedule. So let's say maybe I wanted some due dates. Maybe I want to use this payment schedule for a future estimate, but for this project, I have some specific dates I want to include on those draw schedule items. I can do that here in the reports tool with the schedule editor. And this is how you can make just kind of one-off project-specific edits to the payment schedule. So, if I just wanted to say something like, due 11/1, and I'm doing this for my formal proposal text, just so you know. Maybe I want due 11/15, my 2-week check-in payment. And then I'll just leave remaining balance as is. Now I've got some more project-specific edits that don't adjust my default template. That way I can reuse that later, and we can just go ahead and save that. So I'll show you what this looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and print preview. And this is going to pull up that same formal proposal we can see from the projects page. And then if we scroll all the way down to the bottom of this proposal, we can see our payment schedule, and we can see that it's automatically just inserted those values for us here. So what this means is that when you send your proposal out to your client, they're actually agreeing to the payment terms at the same time they're agreeing to the project cost and the work. So they're able to sign off on that. It includes the payment terms. And then when we begin invoicing, really what invoices do in Clear Estimates is just request payment on payment terms or on the total project cost. So let's get into invoicing a little bit just to show you how that works. So we're still here in reports. And by the way, this is also where you manage invoices and payments for the project is under reports. And then we want to surf all the way over to the far right and get cost status right over here. Now in our cost status tool, this is where we can set up invoices and also create payments or receipts for this specific estimate. Now, the way this works is, like I said, they've already seen the project details. They've already seen the project cost. They've already seen the payment terms. So we can just invoice on those payment terms. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Invoice. And then it gives us different options in terms of where to create our invoice from. Now, since I have a payment schedule included, we can just immediately start invoicing on my different payment terms here. So it's got this drop down here. We can go ahead and invoice on this initial deposit. We can adjust our dates and due dates here if we wanted. And we can also adjust this description if we needed that adjusted for any reason. And then there's also kind of just a summary of all of the project costs, what's been paid to date over here on the right side for your reference. We can also do this from a component or alternate. So, if I just wanted to invoice on a change order, or if I wanted to invoice on just a specific room or section, we can do it that way, or just plug in a manual value and create the invoice that way. But in this case, I'm just going to invoice from a payment schedule on my initial deposit. Let's go ahead and create invoice. And this is a live electronic invoice that you can send via a link. So you can actually text this over to your client if you wanted. You can just copy the link to your clipboard, paste that into an email, into a text message, and I'll show you what this looks like here. And so you can see what the invoice is. It's just a request for payment on my specific payment terms. So it doesn't include any of those project details because it's assumed they already saw all of that on the proposal. So it's just requesting in the deposit payment pretty much. And so we can see status is unpaid. This is a note that you can customize in your options tool. I'll show you where to adjust that here in a second, but you can adjust that in your options tool under your report settings. So let's say they went ahead and paid this deposit. We can manually track the payment just by clicking Add Payment here. And then we can do it from invoice. This middle option allows us to create a payment against an existing invoice. And then we see it's right away got my $1,000 invoice that's unpaid. And let's go ahead and create payment. So what this does is it marks that invoice as paid. And then if we go ahead and grab this invoice link one more time, now we can see that the status is updated. We see payment received, status is paid, and they can download a PDF as a receipt right here. So the invoice almost kind of becomes your receipt once it's marked as paid here. So now that we've done that, we can also print what's called a cost status report. And basically what this does is just shows us what's been invoiced, what's been paid, and what's still due. So if we click print report right here, this will pull up that document and you can kind of get a sense for what that is and what it's for. So basically what this does is it just gives us a breakdown of everything that's been invoiced to date and everything that's been paid, the total paid to date. And then up here we see the total project cost, the amount paid to date, and the remaining cost on this project. So this is a great document. You can always save this for your own records. If you wanted to email this to your client for any reason, you can do that from send to customer just to the right of view report. And it's just going to kind of keep track of everything that's been invoiced, everything that's been paid. We do partner with a payment processor called Explore Pay. They used to be called Clearant. This just makes it so that there's a payment terminal in your invoice where your client can pay you directly, and then it would automatically mark the invoice as paid if they did so. It is a separate company that you get started with that we have an API integration with. But if you're curious about that, here in Reports Cost Status, just click Get Paid. It gives you kind of an overview and how you can get in touch with their team if you do want to set up payable invoicing. All right, so I think that about covers everything. The only thing we haven't really talked about is this options tool. I did want to give you a quick tour of the options tool because there's a lot of different settings in here you might need for your estimate. So that's once again in Tools, Options. Actually, we do have a quick question from Nate. As a Buildertrend user, I'm curious about how the integration works with that. Great question. So the way the Buildertrend integration works is it allows you to just take your full project contents and port it over to Buildertrend in a way that it can import. And the way you do that is based on a CSV file that you can export from your project. So the way we do that is right here in Export Project, we can export to Buildertrend. I have Excel on my external, so I'm not sure if we're going to be able to preview this. I'll try to just open it up in Sheets for you here. Give me 1 second. Okay, great. Okay, so I just ported the export into Sheets so you can see what it looks like. But it's this CSV printout, and it basically formats it based on Buildertrend's requirements. So they gave us a template in terms of how to import all of the part data. So you can see what it does is it divvies up all of the part costs into multiple lines, depending on their cost type. So you see, for some of these parts, it's the same part, but it's got a labor line and a material line. And this is just based on Buildertrend's requirements. And it's just basically through this CSV file. And then what happens, I don't have a Buildertrend account I can access here, but I'll just pull up the help doc that kind of walks through that process. And basically what happens on the Buildertrend side is there'd be an option to import an estimate. Usually they have a specific clear estimates option. And then from there, you would select that CSV file. It would then have you map all of the columns, all of the categories. What that means is, your cost codes and clear estimates. If you have cost codes that you've set up in Buildertrend, it would have you map our cost categories over to their cost codes. And then it would just pull the estimate into Buildertrend so you could use that for project management, job costing, scheduling, whatever you need to use that estimate data for. So that's how it works. It's just a CSV export. It is available on the Pro plan. It'll just download a CSV or your project file that's formatted in a way that Buildertrend can import. All right. And then if you ever needed to check out the help guide on that, you just can come over here to the question mark, go to the help center and just type Buildertrend. And then there's also some links to their support team down here. If you have questions on how that works down at the bottom, you can get in touch with their support. All right. So once again, I'm going to go into Tools, and then I just wanted to give you a tour of this Options page since this is where a lot of your settings live. So the first place it takes you when you go into Options is Company Info. Now, a lot of this stuff should have been filled out when you signed up, but if it isn't, you can always add in or change your company name, address, license number, city, state, zip. Any of that can be edited right here on this page. Same with your contact info down at the bottom. I always recommend use this other handle if you have like a social media or a Pinterest or an Instagram you want to show off your portfolio. You can always include that down here in the other. And you just want to make sure you save changes after any changes you make here. One place some new customers get confused is with this logo setup. So the way you add a logo in is just by clicking Set Company Logo, and then you would choose a file from your drive. Now, once you do that, it's going to kind of stage the logo here. You'll just see it looks like a little document. And then the last step is you just got to scroll down to the very bottom right and click Save, and that finishes the logo import, and then you'll see your logo right up here at the top. Keep in mind there's different toggles here if you wanted to change the orientation of the logo, left, right, or center, how it's justified, or if you wanted to change the size of your logo. I recommend have your logo be roughly the size that you want to see it on the report at the time that you import, and just try to avoid any extra white space. I recommend PNG files for sure, but you do have some size settings here if you wanted to change the size. Once again, just make sure to click Save down here. Labor rate editor is where we can see all of the labor rates that are built into Clear Estimates. You're going to have suggested labor rates from your location right up here at the top. So, whatever location we've set up in update location pricing, update pricing location, it will show the suggested rates for that market right up here. Now, if you're curious what's included in our labor rates, you can kind of hover over this rate text here, and it gives you a little explainer on what's included. And then down here, you have the actual rates that your account is using, is right down here. So when you first sign up, it's just going to default to the suggested rates for the location you set up. But down here, you can make adjustments to that. The one thing I'll say is don't ever delete any of these rates, because these rates are all tied into all of those thousands of parts in your library. So rather than delete rates, just kind of click into these rate columns and make adjustments. So if I pay a truck driver $25 an hour, for example, I can just click into this rate column, save changes, and then any parts in my library that use that rate are then going to be updated for the next estimate. Doesn't go back in time and update previous estimates. So that way, next year you wanted to bump your rates up a little bit, then when you're building estimates, it's going to use those rates. You can add in more rates, though, if you wanted to choose them in your parts. You can just click Add New Record. It does need a letter because it uses this to tie the rate to different parts in your library. You can just plug in any 4 characters you want as the title, and then just plug in your number, and then save changes here. All right. Kind of already went through the payment schedule editor. Time card editor basically just is how you set up what totals you want to see on the time card totals. This isn't a feature I see a lot of customers use, so I usually don't go through this much. But on the projects page, if you wanted to see your time card totals, you can do that from the More dropdown right here. And it just basically shows you the labor hours across each category. But that's there in the options tool if you wanted to change any default settings for that. We already talked about payment schedule editor, but then under report settings, first place I'm going to show you is general. This is if we wanted to adjust the font that we see on that proposal, the size of the text, the color of that font. It'll give you a little sample area down here. This is where also if you wanted to backdate a proposal and you don't want to use the current date, you can uncheck this here and save. And then in the More dropdown in your project, you'd be able to select a different date for the project if you wanted. And then there's different settings pages for each of these different proposal types. Preliminary, formal, subcontractor, even the invoice. So, earlier we were talking about the invoice. If we wanted to customize that invoice note that we see on the invoices, we could do that right here. And there's just various options for the invoice itself. And we just want to make sure we click save after we make any changes there. But then in the proposal settings, you'll have different options. Like if we wanted to omit our logo, we can do that. There's the submitted to and by section. So that's our customers' information as well as our company information. We can choose whether or not that's included here. A little bit further down, you're going to see options that are specific to the components. So earlier we were working with components and you have different options for that. So if I didn't want to show the component subtotals, there's options for that. There's also options to hide the component ID. If I don't want it to say C00, C01 on the report, I can hide those component IDs. We can actually set up a project using nothing but components and then hide the line items in them. So that way it would just say bedroom 1 total, bedroom 2 total, bedroom 3 total. You can actually hide those line items in the components as well. So that's another option you have here. And then Another thing you might want to pay attention to is include line item costs on reports. So this is how you would itemize the proposal if you wanted that total project cost, or I'm sorry, total part cost listed, kind of justified right on the proposal, and just itemize all of those costs for each of those parts. You can do that here. And then we also have a partnership with Acorn Finance if you do want to show some financing options to your client. It's pretty hands-off for the contractor. Just gives them a link to Acorn Finance. They can get Acorn financing directly if available. It's not available in every single state, but it just gives you some options you could include on your proposal if you want. Then down here at the bottom, we can change the report title. If we wanted to say something besides formal proposal, the projects section, which is just where it says project specifications as the header before all your line items, you can change what that says as well. Once again, just make sure to click save after any changes you make here. And then keep in mind there's rounding preferences if you do want to round your base bid to the nearest dollar, $10, $100, etc. There is a way you can sort of create project numbers. If you do have any kind of numbering system you want to use for your projects, you can do that using this project numbers option. And then miscellaneous, this is what I want to show you the most, because this is where you can actually change the default markup that gets used by each new project. So this is going to be basically your default markup that's inherited for each new project you create. So if I wanted to make any adjustments to that, I always want it to be 55% material markup, always want 40% labor markup, just for example. We could set that up by default here and save it. This is also where we can add default miscellaneous items. Maybe I don't want to create that sales tax each time, so I can create it here and just have a 6% sales tax included with all of my projects. I can set that up by default here as well. In integrations, this is where you'd set up things like QuickBooks Online integration. You can log into QuickBooks here. If you do get started with payable invoicing, this is where you're going to drop your Clearant, now called Explore Pay API key down here at the bottom. And this is also where pro users can get their Zapier integration set up. If you wanted to send customer details to a CRM through Zapier, you're able to do that on Pro. And then under the My Account section, if you're a pro user, this is where you can invite additional users to your account. You can also change your password, manage your subscription, take a look at your general account info. So just wanted to give you a little tour of the options tool. And that really just about covers everything. We kind of walked through how to build an estimate, how to search for parts, how to set up payment schedules, how to invoice, how to create receipts. So at this point in time, before I jump back into my slideshow, give you some resources on your way out, just going to check and see if there's any other questions coming in from the audience. I'm really just not seeing anything coming in right now. Okay, great. So I did want to just share some quick resources with you here. First of all, if you wanted to schedule a one-on-one training call with our team, you can absolutely do that. That's included in your trial. It's included in your subscription. You can schedule as many as you need. So this is a QR code. This will take you right to our calendar where you can book some time with us. Otherwise, you can go to clearestimates.com/call schedule, and that'll take you right to our calendar. And then I can even just drop my direct link here in the chat. If you'd like to book some time with me, please feel free to do so. You should see that in the chat messenger now. And then if you haven't signed up, maybe you just joined in today to get an idea of how the system works. We do offer a 30-day free trial for all new customers. So feel free to scan this QR code. It'll take you right to the checkout page where you can start a 30-day free trial. You can also just go to clearestimates.com. You'll see a start free trial option there. Really quick for viewers here in the chat, I am going to drop in just an overview, actual webinar we did on invoicing and payments specifically, since we did cover that a little bit today. If you want more detail on that, I'm going to drop that in the chat messenger as well. Now, if you're watching on YouTube and you can't see that chat messenger, or if you're having any trouble with these QR codes, or if you just have questions, feel free to get a hold of me. You can reach us at support@clearestimates.com. If you do have questions about the presentation, maybe suggestions for things we can do in the future, feel free to reach out. Also, if you're working in Clear Estimates, there's going to be a little blue chat button down in the bottom right corner that you can use to send us a message. We're available 9 to 5 Eastern, Monday through Friday for live support, and you can always reach us there. Even if it's after hours, just drop us a message and we'll get right back to you next business day. Do want to thank everyone so much for joining in. Hopefully this was helpful for you. You will get a recording of this presentation since you registered. And thanks so much again for joining in. We're looking forward to catching up with you at the next one.